Content warning. One of the cases discussed in this documentary involves sexual abuse and assault. If that's going to be a problem for you, I would recommend skipping this episode and joining us again next week. The American justice system is built on the idea of grievances being addressed in a court of law. But lobbying groups and corporations have spent hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars changing the laws to be in their favor. But what about frivolous lawsuits and their impact on the cost of doing business? Join us today as we take a look at the judicial system and the documentary Hot Coffee. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Hi, Rachael. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am excited to talk about this one as it has to do with the two things I know the most about, being poor and the law. So I was so excited when you suggested doing this one this week. I was like, oh yes, because I was married to my ex-husband who was a lawyer when this incident happened, when the title incident about the coffee happened. And so I remember the whole procedure from a law student's point of view. And it was it was fascinating. So I'm excited to talk about it. So
Yeah, I am
yeah.
too. And when this documentary was made, it was 2011.
Yes, take us
And
there.
in 2011, that was the year Prince William and Kate Middleton got married.
Mhm.
That was the year that the Guantanamo Bay leaks, WikiLeaks, occurred. And that was the year that there was the huge tsunami that hit Japan and caused the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster.
Right.
And that year was apparently there was a big PlayStation Network outage that I don't remember this at all, but it was one of the largest data breaches ever recorded and exposed personal data from 77 million accounts.
Oh my.
That was the year that apparently there were just a ton of earthquakes in 2011.
Mhm.
Japan and Spain and New Zealand and a bunch of places had the largest earthquakes on record for their location.
Mhm.
So it was a big year for big earthquakes. And I think the thing most people will remember that year for, that was the year that Osama bin Laden was killed.
Yes, it was like the planet tried to kill us for a while there, and then yes, and then Osama went. So, yep.
Yep. And so this was made in 2011, but the hot coffee incident was from years and years before. I remember that from high school, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and I have very weird memories of this case because my parents are very, very politically conservative. And they talked a lot about frivolous lawsuits and the amount of waste that this causes and the damage it causes to the medical systems and the legal systems and all the things because people are afraid to be sued. And that's why we needed tort reform. And
Right.
even in high school, I understood logically that that was kind of bullshit.
Yeah. Well, my thing was, this was of course pre-internet. The hot coffee incident itself was pre-internet or primarily pre-internet. And when my ex-husband came home and told me about it, my first response, like pretty much everybody, was probably, damn, I wish I'd thought of that. And then I saw the pictures. And I mean, listeners, seriously, pause the podcast. We'll wait. Go look up the pictures of this woman, of Stella Liebert's burns and her skin grafts. And you will realize this was not something that was just a frivolous lawsuit, because I think every one of us has probably been burned by a hot drink at one point or another, but my God, not to this extent.
Yeah, like I know that I've spilled burning water on my hand or whatever. I've blistered
Sure.
and it gets a little red and it hurts, but it's not deadly. And so when you immediately hear the thought that, or hear somebody say that she sued because she spilled hot coffee in her lap, it
Mhm.
brings to mind the image of like red skin, like blisters and
Yeah,
red skin.
sure, exactly.
No, this woman was burned down to the bone. Like
Hmm.
she needed skin grafts. She was so badly injured that she ended up, I can't even explain it to you. You just have to see the pictures to believe the
Yeah,
amount of damage that was caused. And they,
absolutely.
and I love that when they opened this documentary, they were talking to people about what do you think about the hot coffee case? What do you remember? What did you think about this lady? And every one of them was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that she sued over hot coffee. What a stupid thing to sue about." And then they explained the details of the case to them, and
Yeah.
every single one of them was like, "Oh, then yeah, she should have sued and she should have won. She was in the right."
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And the flesh between everyone's thighs is extremely sensitive, obviously. It's not an area that is gets much exposure to sun, let alone, boiling hot water. And I mean, I was so appalled looking at that, and especially a woman of her age with a compromised immune system. I'm stunned that she survived. The
Yeah,
amount of
quite frankly.
infection, yeah, the amount of infection that she was exposed to, and it's just horrifying. And I'm like, no, it wouldn't have been worth it. There's no way I would have taken that for that money. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to give everybody an understanding, because I'm sure we have listeners who were probably not even born yet when this
Right,
happened.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Explain what happened.
so 81-year-old Stella Liebeck, I believe is how she pronounced her name, Liebeck or Liebeck,
Beck. Yes.
um, was in the passenger seat of her grandson's car. He was driving her, and he had like an 89 Chevy, like an old POS car with no cup holders and no anything.
Right. It
And
was her nephew. It was her nephew
her
that was
nephew,
driving.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they went through the drive-through at McDonald's, and he handed her her coffee cup, and they pulled into a parking space and parked so that she could put cream and sugar in her coffee. And when she put it between her legs to take the lid off, it spilled. And the damage it caused was catastrophically bad.
Hmm.
When we say we are surprised she did not die,
Hmm.
that is legitimate. Like this ate holes through her thighs and her body. She was so badly scabbed over it. She needed skin grafts. She was injured beyond the telling of it. And
Right.
then she
It actually fused the cloth of her pants to her skin. And it was a horrible, horrible.
And when she contacted McDonald's, her family, and said,
Hmm.
"Hey, we want you to pay for what Medicare is not covering." That's all she asked for,
Hmm.
was for them to cover the medical bills that she was going to be faced with after this situation. And I think they said it would have been like $100,000 or $80,000. It would have been a sizable chunk of change, but for McDonald's purposes, it would have been
Yeah,
nothing.
sure.
And they basically told her to go jump off a cliff.
Hmm.
And when she and her lawyer started reaching out and doing some research and, you know, calling up the documentation they needed to file a lawsuit, they found out that Stella was one of 700 people who had been badly burned by McDonald's coffee because McDonald's standard operating procedure was to keep their coffee sitting at 180 or 190 degrees because
Hmm.
it kept the coffee warmer and fresher, and they did not have to throw out as much coffee than if they had kept it at 150 degrees.
Right. Hmm.
And so when they ended up in court, the jury found that McDonald's knew they were doing this. They were doing it on purpose. They knew they were hurting people,
Hmm.
and they were ignoring the damage that they were causing, figuring that the cost of blowing people off was cheaper than the cost of throwing out the coffee. And so
Right.
they talked to jurors in the making of this documentary, and one of them said, when we sat down and we figured it out, we awarded her $2.9 million dollars because that is the equivalent of 2 days worth of coffee sales. And that we figured that that was about enough to, you know, encourage McDonald's to make better choices.
Right.
And so when they awarded her, it was $160,000 in compensatory damages. So as covering medical bills and legal fees and all of the things, the damage that they caused to her, that's what they had to pay back to cover that.
Mhm.
And the 2.7 million beyond that was a McDonald's stop being dicks fee.
The
That's what that
punitive
was.
damages, right. Yeah.
And so the media and the lobbying groups and everybody that was involved in this storm of a story took it and ran with it and painted her as this greedy woman who found a
Hmm.
loophole to be able to sue and used this as a poster for why we should change our legal system.
Right.
And it turned into a heck of a case. Like, honestly, if you have not already watched this documentary, it is for free on Tubi right now as we are recording.
Hmm.
You should go watch it. It will change your opinion of
Hmm.
tort reform and the American judicial system.
Absolutely. And like I said, we'll wait. Pause the podcast, watch the documentary, come back and pick it up again because it is not all right. Whenever I hear about, oh, you should sue them, you should sue them, it's not easy to sue somebody. It really isn't. It's not like it is on television. I mean, lawyers are never going to take a case that they don't think they can win, obviously. And they should be honest with you and they should tell you, look, we don't think you have a case. Even if you do, it takes years. It takes years. It is emotionally draining. It's exhausting. Later, when we talk about Jamie Lee, the girl that worked for Hilberton,
Oh yeah,
um, yeah, when
it
we,
was
yeah,
Jamie
Jamie
Lee
Lee
Jones and
Jones.
her
Yeah,
suit
when we get
against
to talking
Halliburton.
about her, yeah, when we get to talk about her case, that's, it's not a quick and easy thing. It's not a get rich quick scheme. Because by the time even by the time you get a verdict, you still have to wait sometimes years to actually get your settlement. And you still have to pay bills and go to work and and everything. And from a lot of people in my life that I've known that have had to sue um for situations like this, it's almost anticlimactic when they finally get their award. you
Yeah,
know and it's not like a celebratory thing. It's more of a thank God that's over. And now you don't have to wake up every day wondering what slanderous thing is going to appear in the media about your case today. And of course, you're not allowed to talk about, oh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
yeah, there is definitely a fundamental misunderstanding of how our judicial system works among the American public. And I remember when I was working in a call center in like 2005, I had to go have a cavity filled. And the dentist, when he gave me the Novocaine injection,
Hmm.
he nicked a vein and it
Okay.
caused my entire left side of my face to swell up and bruise. And so, 4 hours later, when I'm sitting there with this bruising and it's, 9:30 at night,
Hmm.
I called his office and I told them what happened. They passed on the message. He immediately called me back. He called in a prescription for antibiotics in case of infection and, gave me instructions on how to make the bruising go away. And he was lovely and wonderful. And this was a
Hmm.
mistake that anybody could have made. He was not intentionally trying to harm me.
Of
When
course not.
when I went to work the next day, three separate people were like, "You should sue him." And I was like, "For what? For being gently bruised for 3 days?"
Mhm.
Well, for
Right.
a thing that had he purposely injured me, yes, that would have been a lawsuit to talk about. But the fact that everybody jumped to, "You should sue. You were injured. You should sue," was absolutely ridiculous.
Hmm.
And it just is a good reflection of how people don't really understand our legal system or how it works or what you're actually supposed to be compensated for when you are injured or when something happens. Yeah, it is really surreal to me. And I know
Yeah.
that it's not just injury suits. Every time you see somebody who's like, I found a rat head in my bucket of chicken, or I found a band-aid in my bag of chips. Yeah, stuff happens. There's a certain amount of contamination that is expected in products. You can
Hmm.
go to lawyers all day long. Not one of them is going to take your case. It
Exactly.
it is very difficult to have these types of conversations with people when they just don't understand what goes into the process of filing a lawsuit in the US.
Hmm. Yeah, and also you would have to prove that, because in your case with the dentist, you would have to prove some sort of damages. Like, are you now going to have, because of an infection, are you now going to miss work? Are you going to lose wages because of this? You worked at a call center, so of course you talked for a living. Were you not able to speak correctly and maybe you confused customers because of that? It's not just they hurt me, where's my money? It's a lot more complicated.
Yeah. And I think it is also interesting that people don't understand why we have the legal system we have in place.
Hmm.
In the 60s and early 70s, basically across the globe, every, first world country was starting to deal with how do we protect consumers and, the general public from damages from large companies, from billionaires and oligarchs and, government officials and all of that. We need something in place to protect people. And most countries settled on very rigorous regulatory systems.
Right.
So when people talk about, well, in this food that's in the US, you can't put these things in food in Europe. Yeah, that's true because Europe has very stringent requirements of what you can and cannot do with the product or,
Right.
with your customers. America doesn't have that so much. We do have regulatory systems, but they're very lax in comparison to other countries. The system we landed on was that you have the right to take them to court and hold them financially accountable, whether that's the company that you bought your canned soup from, or, McDonald's with a hot coffee, or your boss, or like it. You have the right as an American citizen to go to court and, demand to have your say and be compensated if you were improperly injured or damaged in some way.
Right. Right.
And so when we talk about tort reform and leaning toward, siding on the behalf of businesses and, hospitals and things like that, because it's not fair to them, this is the system that was put in place because it was not fair to us as
Hmm.
consumers.
Right.
So when we talk about tort reform, that is not a functional approach to fixing this problem without an increase in the regulatory end of things.
Definitely. And that's where the change has to happen. Because consumers overall, all we know is, does the damn thing work? Yes or no? And we don't think about long-term effects of things like with Stella Liebek. I mean, had she been a younger woman of childbearing age, it's entirely possible she would have had her fertility altered by the injuries in that particular area. Certainly sexual activity would have been excruciatingly painful, if possible, if not impossible. And again, really, I am urging our listeners, look at the pictures. Seriously, this is not a sunburn type of a, type of a thing, or a couple of blisters.
Yeah, this was a horrible situation. And in the end, the judge that presided over the case reduced the punitive damages from 2.7 million to $480,000.
Mhm.
So the judge did lean on in McDonald's favor in that, but stated in the case that McDonald's had engaged in willful, wanton, and reckless behavior.
Mhm.
So it was well acknowledged that they knew what they were doing and they were doing it on purpose with the idea that they would injure fewer people. The cost of injuring people would be less than the cost of keeping the coffee around. And so when the judge said that and the jury made this decision to award her these millions of dollars. These are not idiots who were asked on the street, would you like to stick it to McDonald's? These are the people who had all the facts of the case.
Yeah, right.
And so if they decided that she should be do that, that should say something to people who were not sitting in that courtroom.
Exactly. And the jury, unfortunately, had no idea that the judge was going to change the award to that particular sum. And so the jury did their due diligence. They were dismissed and went back out into the world. And I'm sure they were just as up, surprised when they read that what they had, chosen to award, the 2.7 or $2.9 million had been, drastically cut, and they have no control over that. The jury has no control over the amount of money awarded in a damages suit. That's up to the judge. Yeah.
Yeah. But with all of the flurry of media attention that this case was getting, and all of the jokes that were coming from the late night talk show hosts and stuff,
Hmm.
lobbying groups, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which, surprise, surprise, is not a governmental body. It is a
Hmm.
lobbying group of people who work for like Conoco and Philip Morris and like
Hmm.
nasty oil and tobacco companies and people that you do not want making decisions for you.
Yeah.
They started throwing money into this idea of tort reform, changing it so that you can't hold companies responsible for huge amounts of money if you are injured or damaged. And
Right.
they sold it as you're hurting doctors who have to pay for liability insurance. They're not going to be willing to be doctors anymore because the cost is going to be too high. And I remembered that being parroted about by people for, God, 5 or 6 years, middle school, high school, like when I was grad into my first couple of years of college. I remember that being a huge talking point. And at that point, like tort reform kind of got thrown into the courts and into the Senate and the House, and it was vetoed by Bill Clinton. It made its way up, and he said,
Hmm.
"No, this is not good for the American people. We're not doing that."
Right.
And then they kept pushing, and George W. Bush, and my notes don't say very nice things about George
I
W.
know.
Bush. Um, he was the one who, on a state level, helped Texas cap punitive damages and then
Hmm.
pushed for it at a national level when he was president. And the things that these lobbying agencies did, the reports that they made, I have never wanted to smack somebody with a big stick more in my entire life. They were just terrible. And so at one point, prior to the hot coffee incident, Ronald Reagan had gone on TV to complain about a lawsuit that a guy had been standing in a phone booth,
Oh,
and
yes.
a drunk driver ran up the curb and slammed into the telephone booth, and he lost his leg in the accident.
Hmm.
And Ronald Reagan went on to TV talking about how he sued the telephone company out of greed because the telephone company had more money than the guy who hit him. And this is what's wrong with our system today. But Reagan did not say to anybody in this process that the reason he sued the phone company was because the telephone booth door was broken and he couldn't open it to get out. He was stuck there and
Right.
was forced essentially to be hit by a drunk driver because he could not escape the telephone booth.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, obviously, of course, the drunk driver doesn't have enough money for this poor man's amputation and then his health care. I mean, that's something that's going to take lifelong health care issues. It's not like, okay, your leg's gone, have a nice life. No, there's, the prosthetics and the physical therapy and the constant risk of infection and all of that. That is something that he's going to have to deal with medically for the rest of his life. And and then to find out that it was indeed the phone company that had been negligent, and the reason they were negligent was Well, this booth gets hit all the time because it is in a very high traffic area and people run into it all the time. So I'm sorry, there's like 11 things that I can think of that would fix that problem. So this man wouldn't, I mean, sure, it was a perfect storm of circumstances, the drunk driver, the broken booth, time, place, and it was just a horrible, a horrible coincidence that it happened. But Reagan made it sound like this guy was kind of rubbing his hands together like Mr. Burns, thinking how he is going to get the most money out of the deepest pockets. And that's not the way that it was.
So Ronald Reagan was maybe the worst person in American history up until recent times. Because so when you think of Ronald Reagan and the stuff that he pushed, what's the big story you remember?
The stuff that he pushed, well, I just remember the constant threat of nuclear war, but Reaganomics, I certainly
So
remember.
the big story that he really leaned into and that I remember hearing about even as a tiny child because I was little when Reagan was in office. I
I
was
was in college. Yeah,
uh,
I was in. Yeah, he reigned from 1980 to 1988, and I
yeah.
graduated high school in '85. So it was my high school years and my college years.
Yeah, so
So
I
yeah,
was an infant and in elementary school, but I still
yeah.
remember the phrase welfare queen.
Oh my
He
God, I haven't
he
heard that in years.
dragged
Hmm.
that through the mud. He hammered on that in front of the TV for months and months and months about the welfare queen who was cheating the welfare system. Do you know anything about that woman?
I do not. Like I said, I was worried about being blown up. But
So
yeah, I do remember, he's like, these women, they just constantly have these illegitimate children so they can get more and more welfare money. That is what I remember the rhetoric being in the background. Yeah.
so that woman's name was Linda
Mhm.
Taylor,
Okay.
and she was maybe at that time Reagan was the worst person in the world. She was maybe number two.
Okay.
She scammed every system. She committed murder. She stole and like she was a career criminal in every sense of the word.
I don't
And
remember the murder part. That part
the
I didn't know
reason
about.
you don't remember the murder part is because Reagan's team talked the Justice Department into dropping the murder charges so that they could charge her on the welfare thing and blow that up in the media. They let
Ah.
her off for murder because it would allow
Whoa.
them to cut welfare benefits.
Mystifying, yet not surprising. Hmm.
Yeah, like when I say maybe the worst person on the planet, I am not lying. So
Oh no, 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 no. I completely relate to that. I totally get that.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
so
stunned we got through those 8 years. I really am.
yeah, so when we're looking at kind of the way that the justice system is and the way that our systems work today, a lot of that is the change that we saw during those years, and even up through like Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, a lot of that change that we saw was funded by people who really want to hurt the average American citizen. They want you to be
Mhm.
poor, they want you to have no control because they want business and wealthy people to have all of the power and all of the money.
You said it
And
when you just said they want to hurt the average American citizen. That was key. That word right there. Yeah, not the billionaires. Nope.
yeah, they and when you look at the PR flurry that kind of happened around this case and around the telephone booth case and like Karl Rove was a
Ugh.
big driving force behind this. He was also working for Philip Morris at the time.
Hmm.
Um and they even started telling fake stories about lawsuits that never happened. The one that they mentioned in this documentary was that there were false stories reported about a lawsuit from someone who was using a lawnmower to trim their hedges. And then they sued because they got hurt because they were using their lawnmower wrong. Like you're not supposed to lift it up and wave it around in the air.
Hmm.
This never happened. So there is no record of any court case of this ever happening ever. This was a story painted to make people look greedy and evil and stupid.
Hmm.
And it worked. Like the American public grabbed onto that and they just ran with it. And then they talked about the case of Colin Gorley. Do you
Oh,
remember?
that poor boy. Yes, yes. This is the woman. She was pregnant with identical twin boys, mostly throughout her gestational period, very healthy. And then she went to her she had an appointment with her her OBGYN, and it was the night before, correct? She had felt that there was considerable less movement in her uterus than normal. I mean, you've been pregnant, so I'm sure you know what was a normal amount of movement, for I mean, I've never been pregnant, so I don't know what it feels like in there. But you knew what was normal for you. And when she went to the doctor the following day, the doctor did not do an ultrasound. She just listened to the fetal heartbeat and said everything was fine. And then, go ahead, you can take it up from here. And then
Well,
part
and
2.
then
Mhm.
it was not fine.
It was
And
not fine.
they discovered that with twin pregnancies, a lot of the times you have two placentas, which means each of the fetuses are getting nutrients of their own accord. They're not sharing. But
Right.
in
They
her
each have
case,
their
she
own umbilical cord that
right,
from the yeah, with the mother. So they're getting an equal distribution of nutrients, oxygen, and the mother's blood.
but in
Hmm.
her case, she had a single placenta and two infants. And so
Hmm.
because of that, her body had, I don't know if she had shifted and things twisted or what exactly had happened, but one of the babies was not getting the nutrients and oxygen and stuff like the other. And when she went in and she said, "Hey, there's this problem. I need to check and see what's going on." And her doctor was like, "It sounds like everything's fine." That lost time left her
Hmm.
baby with severe brain damage. And
Hmm.
from the moment he was born, he's needed significant medical care. And when they went back and figured out, they were digging into the records, her doctor had been sued for medical malpractice 3 times prior to
Yep.
this.
Hmm.
And so this was a doctor who was very bad at their job and should have been held accountable and had not been up till this point. And in the end, she was supposed to be awarded like $5.6 million because this kid, her child, was going to need intense help and medical care and stuff for his entire life. She was
Right.
supposed to be given $5.6 million to cover all of his needs. And she was not aware that because this was after the McDonald's hot coffee
Hmm.
thing, that her state, she was in Nebraska, capped the damages that you can
Yeah.
get in a malpractice suit. And she was only given $1.25 million, from which she had to pay all the legal fees and all of the medical care. And her son, I mean, even as we're sitting here today, if he's still alive, he still requires that care.
Oh, certainly. At the end of the documentary, they said, and this was in 2011. He was in the 11th grade, and he had had 10 surgeries. His first surgery was when he was 1 year old, but he needs to continue to have surgeries because he's also got serious physical malformations as well as the brain damage. He is never going to be able to live independently, ever. He's always going to either have to be in an institution or he's going to have home health care. One of the parents is not going to be able to have a job. They're always going to have to stay home with him. $1.6 million is not going to last very long because remember, they also have another son who is healthy and involved in activities and will has his own expenses, even raising a quote, I'm doing air quotes, a normal child to adulthood is prohibitively expensive. Raising a special needs child along the same, at the same time is ridiculously expensive, not to mention the emotional exhaustion and the anger and the guilt, because I'm sure, I know myself, I would have been saying, had I only pressed the issue, had I only been a little more firm saying, I think we should get an ultrasound. I know that's what I would have done. I would have been blaming myself.
Oh, yes. I would have
Mhm.
hated myself every moment of every day after that for not
Mhm.
pushing to fix that problem, for
Exactly.
for
Right.
not speaking up on it. And I
Mhm.
mean, even when you think of the costs that come with having your average, run-of-the-mill kid, it's not just medical bills and feeding them and all of that, but like the limitations on what you can do as an individual. You can't then uproot your life and go take a job in another state because it pays more. No, because your kid is
Yeah.
in school and you have to take care. And if your kid is like Colin and needs that type of medical care, you have to build a life around a place that can give him that medical care.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it limits you in all of those types of ways. And this poor family is now being stuck paying this out of pocket for damage from a doctor who was negligent,
Mhm.
severely negligent,
Mhm.
and left this poor kid handicapped for his entire life. Every moment
Right.
of his waking life has been spent that way.
I mean, to the point where on his 16th birthday, he didn't know which end of the candle to put into the cake. And then to find out that this doctor had this happen 3 times prior, why was she even still practicing? Why did she still have her license? Why didn't the AMA come after her? It's mesmerizing to me that
Well,
that yeah.
the AMA is one of the people that are, or one of the organizations that funds the US Chamber of Commerce. They
Well,
are
there
in
you
that
go.
lobbying organization
Mhm.
for exactly this reason, because they don't want doctors to have to pay out huge amounts for these problems. But part of the reason you want doctors to have to pay out huge amounts for severe damage like this is so that the doctors who are bad get pulled out of the system. So her doctor on her second medical malpractice case should have been
Mhm.
banned. The
Yeah.
insurance company should have said, we will not insure her. We will not insure your hospital if she works there. She is a
Mhm.
danger to the her patients. And if you continue to employ her, we will not work with you. The
Right.
entire purpose of our system, it's set up the way it is to push people out when they are dangerous or causing problems for people. And so when you change it so that they're not financially responsible for the damage they cause, there's no incentive to get rid of the dangerous doctors or the
Right.
people who are letting, bad product go through the line because it's cheaper than stopping and recalling it all. Like in every industry, that's what this is supposed to do, and it's not doing that anymore.
Right. It's like, so what does this mean? That the onus is on all of us to be able to protect ourselves? The average man on the street doesn't know these things. No, we should not have to be. We're not supposed to be experts. That's why we pay experts. I'm not going to take out my own appendix. I'm not going to go defend myself at my triple homicide trial. I
And
I
and
can't even fix the plumbing for God's sake.
our society has, and I think for the better, arranged itself so that everybody gets to be an expert in an individual field, and we all pool our expertise together to make life amazing for everyone. So I
Mhm.
don't have to know the best conditions for farming or growing crops because
Right.
there's somebody who's doing that, and they're doing an excellent job of it. And like other people don't have to know the ins and outs of, complex financial content. They can go read the article I write about it and
Mhm.
they can
Mhm.
figure out what they need to know. I spent the time and the years getting licensed and doing all the things and learning to be a good writer so that I could put all my skills together and provide this to them. And just the same way that doctors should not be expected to know everything, their expertise is medicine. And like,
Mhm.
if, it is very upsetting to look at the average person and be like, well, you should know how to do that. You should know this. You should have that information. Why? Why in the world would I know this? Why would I have that information? There's been nothing in my life that's led up to that. And nobody should have to. You should be able to be an expert in your own stuff and know the
Mhm.
rest of, how to keep yourself alive and well. You should know how to, cook your own food and wipe your own butt and do the things. And, but outside of basic self-care, You should not have to be an expert in anything to make sure that it's not going to kill you.
Yes, exactly. That is very, very key. I mean, there's a certain amount of caveat emptor, absolutely, but not when it comes to your baby having brain damage. A woman who is pregnant should be able to, if not enjoy her pregnancy, at least have the least amount of anxiety about it as possible, and understand and be secure in the knowledge that there are experts that are out there who went to college for 10 years to specialize in this particular thing. you know we got this. Don't worry, you just do your thing, build your crib from IKEA, figure out what to do with the Allen wrench. I got this part.
Yeah. And we continue to see like the way our system is designed to find for businesses and corporations still continues today. Like right now, as we sit here having this conversation,
Mhm.
for the last several years, it's been huge uproar because Roe v. Wade was overturned, and there's now fights for fetuses, for a fetus to be considered a human being, and you're
Yeah.
not allowed to have an abortion. And so women are dying in hospitals of sepsis because they can't get the medical care they need. But do you know
Hmm.
what news article came out? I saw it yesterday. I don't know if it came out before that.
Hmm.
There's a hospital in Idaho where this Catholic hospital is arguing in court that a fetus is not a person because they injured this fetus and they don't want to be responsible for the damage they caused. So when it hurts you as an individual, it's a person. That fetus is a person and you can't have an abortion. When it hurts
Right.
the hospital's bottom line, it is not a person, is their
That
argument.
is bizarre. I had not heard this.
Oh yeah, it is very upsetting to me.
Oh,
And the amount of I want to say it's hypocrisy at its finest.
oh,
But
certainly.
but honestly, I don't think it is because their overall approach is that money is the most important thing. And
Right.
so when you are not having babies, when you are not bringing children in to be in the workforce, when you are not participating in society in that way, that costs people money, like the larger oligarchs money. But
Hmm.
when they are held responsible for the damage they caused to that fetus, that costs them money. And so their standard is that they should not have to pay for anything, and every bit of any nutrient or or
Yeah.
money making ability that you have belongs to them.
Yeah.
And that is where this stands. And so it is infuriating to sit here and have this be what's going on in the court system right now. But this is just an extension of what started with the tort reform and what started with as the court systems continue to find in favor of the businesses, there is less and less that is put in place to protect the average American.
Right.
And then they got into the details of that when they talked about mandatory arbitration.
Oh, yes, mandatory arbitration. And this is something that I've experienced with as well, because I'm one of those people that actually do read all of the terms and agreements, but before I sign a contract for a cell phone program, a cell phone contract or a credit card or just about everything. Explain what arbitration is for those of us that aren't F. Lee Bailey.
So, mandatory arbitration is the requirement that when you sign a contract, if the mandatory arbitration clause is in there, it means you are agreeing that you are not going to go to court if there is
Mhm.
something wrong, that you are going to sit down with an arbitrator who is going to hear your side and the side of the company, and then they will determine what is fair. And what they determine is final, and you can't
Yep.
take them back to court and sue for it
Nope.
later. Mandatory arbitration is you are saying you are not going to go to court for anything.
Right.
And when they put this in place, you have to understand that they control the arbitrators. So, one of the things they talked about in this documentary was how arbitrators who find in favor of the customer or the buyer,
Hmm.
they don't get hired again to
Right.
arbitrate other cases. So they've set it up so you can't take them to court, and everybody who is there to hold them accountable is on their payroll.
Yep, these are not independent arbitrators. They work for the companies, the big companies. They make the bigger, the big money. They are not lawyers. They're not in many cases, and you're not going to win, and you're not, because just like what you just said, they're not rehired for the next case. And an arbitration agreement is, just like you said, the I will not sue you promise. And much like with bankruptcy, you get one shot and that's it. You can't appeal. You can't, bring forth a civil suit. That's it. You're done. And so many people sign these agreements all the time without knowing that they're signing away their right to take somebody to litigation, that they're signing away their right to have their day in court.
Yeah, and you have to understand that mandatory arbitration applies to literally everything, that
Mm-hmm.
every part of the interaction that you have. There is nothing so bad that a company could do to you that mandatory arbitration is off the table.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Lee Jones, who was
Oh,
featured
yes.
in this documentary, got hired to work for Halliburton when she was 17. I think she said 17, 18, right out of
18.
high
You
school.
just joined the military. Mm-hmm.
She had joined the military and she got hired to work on the Halliburton, something with the company Halliburton. I don't remember exactly what she was doing. But the days, like within a couple of days of her getting on the ground in the Middle East on the Halliburton site,
Mm-hmm.
she was drugged and violently raped by four men so badly that she had to have restorative surgery. Like, this was not a gentle thing. This was not an accident. This was a violent act of assault and abuse. And she is not allowed to sue. She is
Mm-hmm.
being held to mandatory arbitration, and she ended up in court anyway. Like, she ended up she wasn't able to sue Halliburton, but she's suing like the four individuals. There's something to that.
Yes, she's not she had been on site for only 4 days before the gang rape took place. Um, and it was because Halliburton had not put her into a primarily female living structure. She was living with other with men, and she had started to be sexually harassed verbally on day one, and she reported it, and she was told there was nothing that she could do about it. 4 days later, she was drugged, she was raped, vaginally and anally, she was permanently injured. And because of the mandatory arbitration agreement, she was told she was not allowed to sue Halberton, but she did in civil court sue the four individuals who actually, who committed the assault. And understandably, um, that is an extraordinarily difficult legal process to go through, where you need to relive your assault over and over and over in open court, talking to complete strangers, lawyers, politicians. You're on television, and of course, there's always the victim blaming that goes on in any sexual abuse case. So I am stunned that this woman is still is still psychologically, able to have to push through. She just has mad respect here for her. Yeah.
Yeah, but that when they talked about mandatory arbitration, this was the case that they used as their example
Hmm.
of there is nothing that goes so bad that you can say mandatory arbitration no longer applies. I get to take you to
Hmm.
court now. That they could, if they killed you, it's still
Yeah.
mandatory arbitration. And that
Yeah.
recently happened with Disney World.
Oh,
Uh,
I didn't know this. Do tell.
so a woman and her husband went to Disney World and she had a food allergy and she told the waiter at the restaurant at Disney about her food allergy, but he either, I don't know if he disregarded it or ignored it or if he didn't hear it or what the deal was, but he brought her something she was deathly allergic to and she died. And Disney, the corporation Disney, took when they got taken to court, they said that because they had purchased Disney Plus streaming as part of the contract, the Disney streaming, you agree to mandatory arbitration for all interactions with anything Disney related around the world. So because they wanted to watch Lilo and Stitch at home, her husband is not allowed to sue them in court, is their argument.
I don't even know what to say. That's psychotic.
Yeah.
That's absolutely psychotic. And there's a special place in hell for these. Can the husband at least sue the restaurant, or is the restaurant owned by Disney? I mean,
Because the
oh,
restaurant is part of the Disney Springs, like they have a whole restaurant area where it's stores and restaurants and
okay,
stuff where you can go, and you're not technically in the park, but it is Disney. Everything, it's all Disney branded, all owned by the
okay.
company. So Disney is technically responsible for what happened there. And if you've ever been to Disney World, especially in the last decade,
Hmm.
you will understand why that it may have been hard for that waiter because they are cramming 500,000 people a day
Sure.
into the parks, into these restaurants, into these shops, and they are not, while I'm not going to say they are understaffed because my experience there was lovely and I never had a moment where it felt like things were not safe or anything,
Hmm.
um, they clearly do not have the capacity to pay attention to the details like that in every moment of every encounter.
Sure.
And again falls all the way back to the money. Like there should be a cap. You should not be able to fit 500,000 people into a park, or a quarter of a million people into a park, even one the size of Disney World per day. You're not going to be able to keep all of those people safe and all of those people healthy and all of those people cared for,
It
especially
sounds
when
like Black Friday at my store every day.
every moment of every day. And then the worst
Sure.
is they don't have potable water. Um, where when we went to Disney, I took my daughter in 2024.
Hmm.
We brought and we brought water bottles. We each bought a 16-ounce bottle of water with the idea that we would refill them at water fountains and stuff throughout the
Hmm.
park. And it tasted like that water poured right out of Satan's butthole. It was
Oh my
the
God.
most sulfurous,
Oh,
nasty water. I imagine if you drank that every day for, a week or two, you might end up with kidney stones. It was bad.
or a second head growing out of your neck or something like that. Now,
Like,
is that because they want you to purchase water there?
I think it is because Florida does not give a shit about the people who live there, and so they don't make any effort to make the water better. But
Oh,
Disney,
that's not right.
especially
Yeah.
Disney could put filters, Disney could make it better, but they
Yeah.
choose not to, probably in large part because they want you to pay $6 a bottle for a bottle of water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like and when COVID hit, and every zoo and museum and amusement park, they all shut down the water fountains. You weren't allowed to use the
Hmm.
water
Of
fountain, even to refill a water bottle, because they didn't know how germs were going to spread.
course.
And I have been to probably 150 zoos and amusement parks and museums and things in the, 5 years since COVID hit. Not one of them has brought the water fountains back.
Mm.
They're all still shut down because they would really like you to go buy water at the concession stand.
Hmm. Yeah. They figured out, oh, look what we can get away with. Look
Yeah.
what people are willing to do.
Yeah, so very much I am assuming that because Disney owns the Florida property, like they are technically their own little city. They
Hmm.
maintain their own police and their own medical, like ambulance care and stuff. The state of Florida doesn't contribute to that, or at least it didn't before their whole situation with Ron DeSantis. Um,
Right.
so Disney knows that that water is the foulest thing that you've ever tasted in your entire life, and they're
Hmm.
leaving it that way. They are not putting in any kind of reverse osmosis system or anything. They're letting you drink Satan butthole water.
Satan butthole water. Oh my God. That then again, I mean, I'm Generation X. I've had so many practice germs it probably wouldn't even phase me. But but still, I mean, just on taste alone, I mean, we're brought up to, to understand that if something tastes really disgusting, it's probably bad for you. And they're, well, okay, better safe than sorry. But sure, I mean, if they'll find that people will pay, like you said, $6, $7, $8 for clean bottled water, why not?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
already talked to my daughter if we go back to Disney, which I'm sure we will eventually at some point, and we go to the Florida location, we're buying bottled water with Brita filters so that we
Oh, yeah,
can,
in the actual containers that have them right on there. Yeah.
yep, because I'm not paying $50 a day for water, but I'm not drinking the Florida water anymore
You're
either.
not drinking the Satan butthole water either. I mean,
Yeah, that's nasty.
certainly not.
But so that's just like speaks to the larger, the control that companies have and the responsibility that they have to their consumers that they're kind of ignoring.
Hmm.
And in some cases, actively working against the Halliburton, knowing that Jamie Lee Jones, went to them and said, I am being harassed. And they said, ah, that sucks for you.
Hmm.
And then she got violently raped, and they were like, ah, well, now you need to see our arbitrator about that. And so there was no concern on their part for her health or safety at all, not even a
Hmm.
little bit.
No.
And that seems to be the approach from every company in the country. There is no concept of maybe we should not do this because it would hurt somebody, or maybe we should stop this because somebody might, this might not be healthy, this might not be safe. There is so little caution given, and it's getting worse and worse as corporations get more and more control and more power.
Hmm. Well, and also with Jamie Lee Jones, they locked her in a shipping container after once after the rape had happened, and and she had reported it. They said, well, okay, obviously you can't live in the housing unit anymore. They isolated her and they made her live in a shipping container with an armed security guard outside that would not let her leave or use the phone. And finally she was able to she got a security guard that sympathized with her, and she was allowed to use the phone, her get a phone and call her father, who had to call the federal government to get federal agents to come and rescue her. And this is someone in our military. This
Yeah.
is how they're treating somebody in our military. And I mean, on one hand, all we're hearing is veterans, thank the veterans, and yay, the military, and blah, blah. And then, oh, unless you're going to try to sue somebody.
Or
My
unless
God.
the veterans need health care, or unless they have
Oh,
been injured and need, legal counsel, or you know,
mhm.
thank the veterans for, fighting for oil rights, and then
Right.
shut the hell up about it and let the veterans be sick and homeless and die. Like that is our approach.
Well, I mean, if the fetus that they're fighting so hard to save grows up to be gay, they're not
Yeah.
going to still support its rights.
It's just been so visceral to me,
Ugh.
the hatred that the wealthy seem to have for the people who buy their products, for the people who support their businesses, for the people who work for them and build the products that they're selling.
Hmm.
And this just was such an excellent example of that. As a consumer, I don't want to go to a place that says, if we burn you so badly that you require hospitalization and months of skin grafts and
Hmm.
stuff, then that's your problem. Sorry.
Right.
But we're not really given other options, so to speak. I mean, you don't have to eat at McDonald's, but I guarantee you Burger King and Chick-fil-A and Wendy's,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're all going to be exactly the same. It's all the exact same system. They're cut from the same cloth. They just, one of them's chicken and one of them's burgers, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it is very unfortunate. And you really can't vote with your dollar. Like if you find a lovely local place that is, that's great. But larger companies, I mean, Ben and Jerry's got bought out by Unilever and the Ezekiel Bread's bought out. Like the places that you think that you're spending your money and doing well and making smart choices, they
Hmm.
get bought up by the corporate systems quick and easy without your knowledge.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And that's the key thing, without your knowledge. I mean, you could be, you could have a company that or a store or whatever that you love, and then you find out, or you don't find out, that they've merged with this other company that doesn't have values that align with yours, or and who are you going to take it out on? The college kid that's making minimum wage there, or you can't do that. You can't.
You really can't. And when we think about this, Stella Liebeck died in 2004. So she had her situation and she dealt with it as best as she could. She's no longer alive, but thanks to her and her legal team and the
Hmm.
700 other people who were so badly burned, McDonald's has lowered their coffee temperature by 10
Hmm.
degrees.
Yep.
10 degrees. That's all you got. Like,
Yep.
I guarantee you 160-degree coffee will still scald the shit out of you.
Oh, I'm sure.
Uh, but, and like, what if she had taken a sip of that? What if she had tried to drink that? What would that have done to her esophagus?
Exactly.
Uh,
And I mean, well, it's entirely likely that she would have been so shocked that she probably would have dropped the cup, and then she would have had the burns all the way down on her chest and her abdomen as well. It was not going to end well for her in any way, in any scenario. That poor woman was going to be debilitated, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And you don't, I mean, even though there were these 700 other people that have had that same complaint, you also have to wonder how many more there were that didn't register a complaint because the person sitting next to them said, "Well, it's hot coffee, you idiot. What did you think?" "Oh,
yeah.
yeah, I guess." And then they went home and just put balm on the burn, or band-aids or something, and that was it. They went about their day, and they thought that they were the idiot because you know
Yeah, and to be fair, in addition to lowering the temperature of their coffee by 10 degrees, they now also print warning hot coffee on the lid.
Yes, good to know. It's
Yeah.
like every time we have things at our store. We also sell backpacks and things like that to carry our products in, and we all have those the little packages of silica gel in there to absorb the moisture that say, "Warning: Do not eat." And I always joke with my coworkers, like, the reason that these warnings are on these is because at some point somebody did try to eat one and something bad happened. There's a reason that all laws exist. Um,
Yeah,
but
every law that's on the books, every warning, every regulation,
Mhm.
every rule or standard that is set by a company or the government, that was written in blood.
Mhm.
Someone was injured or hurt or died or
Right.
something happened because of this, and now they had to make a rule. So
Right.
when they talk about um oh, it has to have a warning for hot coffee. Yeah, at least 701 people had severe burns for there to be a
Mhm.
warning on that cup.
Right.
So when you look at that and you're laughing, you're like, oh, huh, what idiot would eat silica gel? Oh, what idiot would pour
Mhm.
hot coffee on themselves? A lot of people who were not
Mhm.
idiots, who, for accidental, whatever reason, sometimes children, sometimes people who can't read and don't understand the warnings. But like when you're looking at this, the damage has been caused, and that is why the rule exists.
Sure. Yeah, this was a fascinating documentary. It was fascinating. It made me angry. And I mean, and you said before that you said the hatred that the wealthy and the industries have for their. I don't think it's even hatred. I think it's apathy. They just don't care. I don't know if they're trying to hurt us. I think they just don't care if they do or not.
I don't know. Every interaction I have with every business, every company
Mhm.
feels like, why don't you just give me everything of value of you? Like,
Yeah,
why do I have to interact with you? Why do I have to sell you a product? Why can I not just extract your value? And that feeling gets worse and worse over time because the
hmm
situation is getting worse and worse over time. I remember when I was a kid, Home Depot was had the best customer service. You could return things that Home Depot did not even sell, and they would take it back because it was important to them that you as a customer respect them and like them and want to do business with them. Now, if you go to Home Depot and you get shocked by an electrical outlet that was left exposed, they're going to tell you, "Why did you touch that, stupid?" Like,
Oh,
like we went
yeah.
in and they had mismarked. We needed a new ceiling fan because the one in our bedroom broke, and
hmm
we went to a big box hardware store and they were labeled at one price. Like there was a sign on the shelf that said they were one price. And when we got it up to the register, it was like $150 more expensive. And we went and pulled the label off the shelf and we showed it to them and they were like, we'll give you $25 less. It was like, no, you've
No,
posted a wrong price that's $150 less. This was the price you have it labeled at, and there was no moving them. The fact that they lied about the price did not encourage them to sell it at the price that they had it labeled at.
wonderful. I guess they thought, well, then go to a different big box store. We don't
That's
need your
exactly
business
what they
that
thought.
badly, and whereas with I mean, the Home Depot return policy of your, sounds wonderful because not only do you get to return this tool, but you're in the store now. You're
Yes.
going to make a Home Depot purchase.
Well,
They're
and
not
that,
really losing any money because
yeah,
they've
not
now
really
got
just
you
even
there.
returns. Like there, when
Right.
I was a kid, if you went into Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever the big hardware store
hmm
you were at, the people that worked there were retired carpenters and like
hmm
people who understood the product and knew what it was about, and they were the ones who helped you.
hmm
Now they have phones that when they look in it, they can tell you what aisle stuff is in. But if you had a question about the Quonset hut you were building or whatever,
Yeah.
nobody there can help you because
No.
they no longer hire based on people who have the skill set to help the customer base.
Right.
And that's true of everywhere.
Oh yeah. My dad would have loved to have worked at a place like that, and he would have been one of the, well, let me tell you how to do this, okay? You don't want this, or this. That's just going to confuse you. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, they can take out their phones and go, okay, well, those wing nuts are in aisle 11, about halfway down the aisle, maybe eye level, go check. But as far as what to do with the wing nuts, no clue.
Yeah,
And God forbid your child shoves one of the wing nuts up their nose and aspirates, you can't sue them.
yeah.
Yeah.
But on that note, thanks for listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with your hosts, Rachel and Roxanne. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the judicial system and hot coffee. Join us again next week for a glimpse into another financial problem and a documentary all about it. If you enjoyed our show today, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your podcast app. Thanks for listening. See you again next week.
Bye for now.